should have trusted my instincts about Adam Sullivan. I first met him when I was hired as his tutor. His parents were wealthy, respected figures in town, and their son was, as they described, a gifted child with behavioral challenges. At first glance, he seemed ordinary enough. Blonde hair, pale blue eyes, a quiet demeanor. But there was something about him that unsettled me. The first few sessions were fine, albeit strange. Adam was far more intelligent than most kids his age. He grasped concepts quickly, but he didn't seem to enjoy learning. He enjoyed watching me teach. He studied my expressions, my mannerisms, as if I were the subject of the lesson. He rarely spoke, only responding when I asked direct questions, and even then, his answers were eerily precise, almost mechanical. One afternoon, I noticed something odd. On his desk was a small notebook filled with meticulous handwriting. Curious, I glanced at the pages, expecting to see school notes. Instead, I found lists, long, detailed lists of names. Some had check marks next to them, others were crossed out. I recognized some of them, students from his school, neighbors, even teachers. Beside each name were numbers and symbols I didn't understand. Some had asterisks, others had question marks. My stomach twisted. "What's this?" I asked, flipping through the pages. Adam didn't look up. "Just something I keep track of." "Track of what?" He finally met my gaze, his expression unreadable. "People who need to disappear." I let out a nervous laugh. "That's not funny." "I know." A cold unease settled over me. I set the notebook down and forced a smile. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next time I came over, the notebook was gone. Then, people started disappearing. At first, it was small things. A classmate of Adam's moved away unexpectedly. A teacher quit without notice. But then the police reports began. A missing girl from his school. A jogger who never came home. A substitute teacher who was last seen leaving campus one evening but never made it home. The local news covered each case with increasing urgency, but no suspects emerged. One evening, I was grading Adam's assignment in the living room when I heard his mother crying in the kitchen. His father spoke in hushed, urgent tones. I moved closer, listening. "Something's wrong with him," she sobbed. "Ever since he was little, it's like he doesn't feel anything." I didn't hear Mr. Sullivan's reply, but I heard the fear in his voice. That night, I couldn't sleep. Adam's vacant stares, his obsessive note-taking, the way he seemed to enjoy watching me instead of learning. It all made sense in a horrifying way. He wasn't just different. He was something else entirely. Something calculating. The next time I was alone with Adam, I confronted him. "I know what you're doing." He tilted his head, that eerie curiosity in his eyes. "And what am I doing?" I hesitated. "People are going missing. People you've written about." He smiled then. Not a child's smile. Something calculated. Something cold. "You think I did something to them?" The air felt too thick. "Did you?" He didn't answer. He just slid something across the table toward me. A folded piece of paper. With shaking hands, I opened it. It was another list, but this time, there was only one name on it. Mine. I felt lightheaded, my pulse hammering in my ears. "What is this?" Adam leaned back, tapping his fingers on the desk rhythmically. "You ask too many questions." I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "I'm leaving." Adam didn't try to stop me. He just watched, his eerie smile never fading. As I reached the front door, he said, "See you soon." I ran. I ran out of that house and never went back. I told the police everything, but they dismissed me. He was just a kid, they said. A weird, disturbed child, but harmless. Then, one night, the Sullivans' house burned to the ground. No survivors. The investigators found evidence of an accelerant, but no trace of forced entry. It was ruled as an accident. Adam's body was never found. Weeks passed, but I never felt safe. I moved to a different town, changed my phone number, but the nightmares followed me. In every dream, I saw his face, those cold blue eyes, that knowing smile. I started receiving strange phone calls. Each time I answered, there was only silence. At first, I thought it was my imagination. Then, one night, I heard a faint breathing on the other end. I stopped answering unknown numbers. I changed my locks, added security cameras, but I never felt at ease. One evening, while taking out the trash, I saw a small figure standing at the end of my driveway. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching. When I blinked, he was gone. A few nights later, I woke to a noise outside my window. My heart pounded as I crept to the curtains. There, in the dim glow of the streetlight, was a scrap of paper taped to the glass. I hesitated before peeling it off, my hands trembling. It was written in familiar, meticulous handwriting. "I told you I'd see you soon." I never believed in pure evil until I met Oliver Wells. I was 19 when I got a job babysitting for the Wells family. They lived in a quiet, affluent neighborhood, their house a pristine two-story colonial with a neatly manicured lawn. Oliver was 8 years old, small for his age, with dark, watchful eyes and an eerie stillness about him. His parents were polite, but distant. The kind of wealthy people who paid well as long as you didn't ask questions. And I didn't. Until it was too late. The first night was uneventful. Oliver barely spoke. He sat on the couch, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. When I asked him what he wanted to do, he just shrugged. No TV, no games, no talking. Eventually, I left him alone and scrolled through my phone until bedtime. It was the second night when things got strange. As I was making him a peanut butter sandwich, I felt a sudden prickle at the back of my neck. I turned around, and there he was, standing in the doorway, silent. "Jesus, Oliver, you scared me." He didn't respond, just tilted his head and smiled. A small, unsettling smile. I handed him the sandwich, but he didn't take it. "Do you ever think about dying?" he asked. I blinked. "What?" "Dying." He finally took the sandwich, his eyes never leaving mine. "I think about it a lot." I laughed nervously. "That's kind of dark, don't you think?" He took a bite, chewing slowly. "Not really." I tried to shake it off, but that night I found myself locking the bedroom door. Something about Oliver's expression stuck with me. The way he looked at me, as if he were studying me like a bug under a microscope. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Small things at first. Dead insects neatly arranged in a perfect line on the kitchen counter. Tiny, deep scratches on the wooden dining table, like claw marks. The family cat, missing for 2 days, found in the backyard, its tiny body eerily still, with no clear cause of death. And then there was his dog, Max. Max was an old golden retriever, slow but friendly. One evening, as I walked into the living room, I saw Oliver sitting on the floor beside Max. He had a pair of scissors in his hand, running the blade along the dog's ear. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Oliver looked up at me, completely unfazed. "Just seeing if he flinches." I grabbed the scissors from him. "That's not okay, Oliver." He only smiled again. "I know." I told his parents about the incident, but they brushed it off. "He's just curious," Mrs. Wells said. "You don't have kids, do you? Boys can be strange at this age." I wanted to argue, but what could I say? That their son terrified me? That I had started sleeping with a knife under my pillow when I stayed over? Then, one night, everything escalated. I had put Oliver to bed around 9, then settled on the couch with a book. Around midnight, I heard the creak of a floorboard. I sat up, heart pounding. "Oliver." Silence. I stood and walked toward the hallway. The house was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of a nightlight in Oliver's room. His door was open. I stepped inside. The bed was empty. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Then I heard it. The sound of something sharp scraping against wood. I turned, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. And there he was, standing at the top of the staircase, a carving knife in his hand. My breath caught in my throat. "Oliver, put that down." He took a slow step forward. "Do you know what it feels like?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "What?" My legs were frozen in place. To cut something that's still alive. My stomach dropped. I needed to get out. "Oliver," I said carefully, forcing my voice to stay calm. "This isn't funny. Give me the knife." He just kept walking. I bolted. I ran down the stairs, my heart slamming against my ribs. I could hear his small footsteps behind me, the knife scraping against the wall as he dragged it along the paint. I reached the front door, yanking at the handle. Locked. My shaking hands fumbled for the deadbolt. Then I felt it, a sharp sting against my arm. He had cut me. Adrenaline surged through me as I kicked back, sending Oliver tumbling to the floor. He let out a sharp laugh, something high-pitched and unnatural. I ripped the door open and ran into the night. I never went back. I told his parents what happened, but they didn't believe me. He was sleepwalking, Mr. Wells insisted. He wouldn't hurt anyone. But I knew the truth. A year later, I saw a news article. Local family tragedy. Wells' parents found dead in their home. Both of them had been stabbed multiple times in their sleep. Oliver was missing. They never found him. A month after the incident, I moved to another city, trying to erase the memories. But the nightmares persisted. Every night I saw those cold, dark eyes, watching. The sound of a knife scraping against wood. And then, one night, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, me sleeping in my new apartment. On the back, written in neat, childlike handwriting, were the words, "I found you." I never thought an 8-year-old could be truly evil until I met Daniel Harper. I was 22 when I took a job as a live-in nanny for the Harpers, a wealthy couple in upstate New York. They had a sprawling estate, the kind of place that looked picturesque in the daylight, but eerie once night fell. My job was simple: take care of their son, Daniel. They warned me he was difficult, prone to tantrums, emotionally distant, and a little too smart for his age. From the moment I met Daniel, something felt wrong. He didn't act like a child. He rarely played, never laughed, and when he spoke, his words were slow and deliberate, as though he weighed each syllable. His dark eyes locked onto mine in a way that made my skin crawl. "Are you going to last longer than the others?" he asked the first night as I tucked him into bed. I forced a laugh. "I plan to." "They all say that," he murmured before rolling over, his small frame barely shifting beneath the blankets. At first, it was little things. I'd find my shoes moved to odd places, my phone settings changed, notes scribbled in childish handwriting left on my nightstand. The messages were unsettling. "You should leave. They don't believe you." They never do. One night, I woke up to find Daniel standing in my doorway, staring at me. Just standing there, silent, in the darkness. I nearly screamed. "Go back to bed, Daniel," I said, my voice shaky. He turned without a word, disappearing into the shadows. I told the Harpers about his strange behavior, but they brushed it off. "He's testing you," Mrs. Harper said with a tired smile. "He does that to all of them. Just ignore him." But Daniel wasn't just testing me. He was studying me. One evening, I was cleaning up after dinner when I heard whispering from the hallway. I peeked around the corner and saw Daniel, standing with his back to me, whispering to something in his hands. "Who are you talking to?" I asked, my voice more unsteady than I liked. He turned slowly, revealing a small pocket knife, the blade barely an inch long but gleaming under the dim kitchen light. "It's for you," he said. I swallowed hard. "That's not funny. Give it to me." He smiled, a slow, creeping thing. "You can't stop what's coming." I locked my door that night. It didn't matter. I woke up to the feeling of something pressing against my throat. My breath hitched. My hand flew up, grasping at nothing. The room was empty, but the sensation lingered, cold and undeniable. I turned on the lamp, my pulse hammering. The door was still locked. I was being toyed with. The next morning, I went to the Harpers. "I can't stay here. There's something wrong with your son." Mr. Harper sighed, rubbing his temples. "We understand. We'll have your final check ready by the end of the day." "Just like that?" I asked. "You're not the first to leave suddenly," Mrs. Harper admitted. "And you won't be the last." That was all they said. That afternoon, as I packed my things, Daniel appeared in the doorway. "You're leaving?" "Yes, Daniel." He nodded. "Smart." I shuddered. "Goodbye, Daniel." "Goodbye," he echoed. "For now." His words haunted me long after I left. Years passed, and I tried to forget. I moved away, started fresh. But last week, a headline caught my eye. "Wealthy couple found dead in their home. 8-year-old son missing." The Harpers were dead. Their bodies were discovered in bed, their throats slit. No sign of forced entry, no suspects. And Daniel was gone. I tried to convince myself it had nothing to do with me. I told myself he was probably dead too. But deep down, I knew better. And then, yesterday, I found a note in my mailbox. "You didn't say forever." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in my apartment sent me into a panic. Shadows stretched too far. My breath felt too loud. Around 3 a.m., I woke to a soft rustling outside my bedroom door. My skin went ice cold. I stayed frozen in bed, too terrified to move. Then, I heard it. A whisper, barely audible. "Still smart?" I lunged for my bedside lamp, flicking it on. The room was empty. The door was still locked. My heart hammered in my chest as I got out of bed and checked the apartment. Nothing was out of place, but I knew he had been there. The next day, I packed a bag. I called my job, said I was taking an emergency leave, and booked a flight across the country. I wasn't going to wait for Daniel to show up again. At the airport, I felt like I was being watched. A child's laughter rang out somewhere nearby, but when I turned, no one was there. I boarded the plane, relief washing over me as we took off. I told myself I was safe now. When I landed, I rented a hotel room under a different name. Just for a while. Just until I could figure out what to do. But when I walked inside, my stomach dropped. Sitting on the bed was an envelope with my name on it. My real name. My hands trembled as I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in neat, childish handwriting. "You can't run forever.